Welcome back to With Honors. This is a show made with my classes, by the class, and for the class. It's supposed to be a space where our voices, our thoughts, and our shared stories all come together. And whether this is your first time listening or you've been a part of our journey before, I'm really glad you're here on our side. This show was created to be another creative outlet for our students' voices and perspectives. It's one thing to write an essay, but it's a whole other thing to present about your topic to the class. And that can be super intimidating for anybody to stand up in front of a group and share. But we found that sitting behind a microphone at a table with just you, me, and a friend or two, the walls can come down and we can let your voice, your expertise fly. It's where we talk about the books we read, the questions they raise, the experiences we have in the class, and the moments we carry with us afterward. Well, it's only mid-July, but our summer break is rapidly coming to an end. Today, I'm soloing a new level for our upcoming class by discussing my approach to our summer reading book, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I wanted to model how you go about reading your summer reading book, but also how you go about reading intentionally in an honors classroom. And because how we started Journey says a lot about where we're going. First, I want to talk about summer reading in general and why we even do this in the first place. Summer reading matters because we're not just sometimes students or sometimes human beings. We're all the time humans. We're all the time thinkers. And that means we need to keep our brains and our spirits alive and engaged, even in July, even during our breaks. It's like food. A growing kid needs to eat. But I didn't stop eating after I was a kid. I still eat now. If I go on long stretches without eating, my body's going to slow down and stop functioning well. And if I eat nothing but junk food for too long, man, I feel it. The same thing goes for reading and thinking, engaging with art, playing video games, listening to music, all of the things that challenge me. And that's nourishment too. When I leave my mind turned off for a long time, it gets weak. And just like any weak muscle, it's sore and tough to use again when I try to get back into shape. Summer reading isn't busy work. It's supposed to be sustenance. We aren't just reading for a check mark. We read because it keeps us fed. It's you keeping your reading muscles from going cold. It's you practicing how to think, how to feel, and how to notice. Well, why the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? That is a question I have gotten numerous times this summer. Who picked this book and why? Well, I picked Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I have a lot of reasons going for it. Sometimes the books we read and movies we watch provoke an audience or even make them feel offended. This summer debuted the new Superman movie by James Gunn. And while there were early shouts of success for the film, I immediately heard one outlet complaining to their audience that it ruined the iconic meeting of Superman. They said, he's gone woke, meaning that his character seems so far beyond liberal that he's lost perspective of what's reasonable. As if protecting the weak, telling the truth, standing up to cruelty was beyond what's reasonable, right? Well, as a guy who grew up loving Superman and the X-Men, I knew I'd probably feel differently. Oh, and I definitely do. This Superman admits his human weaknesses, he loves people despite their nationality, and he inspires me to be a better man tomorrow. But even here, we find a movie that angers some folks, excites plenty of others, and challenges us to have conversations about what's really going on in our lives. Well, same with my choice for this summer's book. Some of my reasons are academic. It is a story rich with style and structure and symbolism. It deals with love and loneliness and art and failure and ambition. There are deep, complicated characters who remind us of ourselves and people we know. It connects to Shakespeare. There's plenty of things for us to discuss in an academic classroom. But I'm going to be honest. I had my selfish reasons too. I also picked this book because I come from a childhood rooted in love for video games. I can remember my mom and dad had an Atari in their living room when I was just a little kid. And that was back before they divorced. So I had to be like 3. I was there in the 80s when Nintendo brought us Super Mario Brothers. I remember summer nights with Legend of Zelda, Kid Icarus, Ghosts and Goblins, Metroid, Castlevania. I remember the movie The Wizard blowing our minds when it revealed the endgame battle with Super Mario Brothers 3, because the game hadn't even been seen yet. And I think my brother and I almost fell into the floor in apoplectic shock. I was there when PlayStation brought us Resident Evil and even more Final Fantasy, when Xbox brought us Halo, when Sid Meier brought us Civilization games, especially Civ 2, Civ 5. I was there when Bethesda gave us Skyrim and Fallout New Vegas. That game kept me alive during the summer of the pandemic back in 2020. This book lives in that space between video games and stories, between failure and the idea that in life, sometimes you get another try. You get another tomorrow. You get a chance to hit the reset button. That's powerful. Sophomores are at the exact center of this. I wish I had someone there when I was 15 who would have been able to share stories and video games and ideas and conversations like this. I mean, I had plenty of great mentors, but now I get to be that person for others. And I want to explore that power with Honors 10 this year. Now let me talk a little bit about how I approach reading this book, like my actual reading process for an honors level class. When I read for real, when I'm reading like a student or a teacher or a thinker, I automatically see it into 2 levels. This is what I was trained to do, and it's a process that I've gone through for years now, so I automatically fall back into the habit of these good movements. It's what we call the L1s and the L2s. If you've been in my class at all before, you're probably already rolling your eyes because Crockett always talks about the L1s and the L2s. L1s are what I call the level 1 items, the surface level notes. So that's the text evidence kids will quote on their pages in class. When I ask what's happening or who's who, where do you learn about the character? What did you notice about the setting or conflict in the language? It's the basic building blocks for our conversations. It's when you point back with your finger to the page and said, I know it's true because here on page 7, blah, blah, blah. L1s are not the deep thinking that we're called on to produce. L1s are the evidence of our deep thinking. It's the evidence our deep thinking must be rooted in, or else we're just making it up. L2s are what I call the level 2 or thinking deeper notes. L2s are the connections you have between the book and something else in your life. The assumptions that you have about characters, the assumptions you have about images, or what an event is supposed to mean. They're the things that you're reminded of when you go back and read that L1 evidence. L2s are where I go, this reminds me of that time when blah, blah, blah. Or, this seems so similar to blank. And I wonder if the author meant blah, 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 blah. I was reading a novel for a college professor one time, and I asked Dr. Null, you've got this guy and this girl having a conversation out in the orchard. It always reminded me of Adam and Eve, but I don't know if I'm supposed to think yada, yada, yada. That was me activating my L2 assumptions about whatever was in the text. What's being shown versus what's being said. Those are all your L2 thinking. Now, when I annotate, I'm switching back and forth between my L1s and my L2s. I'm circling evidence on the page and I'm jotting annotations on the side. Or I'm quoting a page number with a fragment of a quote in my notes, and then I'm just free thinking about it. Sometimes I'm just marking a funny line or a detail about a character. Sometimes I'm asking myself the hard questions that we're supposed to wrangle with. Sometimes I'm circling a sentence or writing oof next to it because, man, it just hits. But I don't want to forget what my bigger reaction was later. So even then, I feel obligated to pause and jot it down because I know I'm going to want to talk about it later in class. Reading isn't always passive. I'm working alongside the story. So in a way, it's like a two-player game. It's what the authors created and what I, the player, am interpreting from it. So now I wanted to give you an example of what it's typically like to go through and read and annotate that kind of reading, what my process kind of looks like. I'm only going to explore the first 50 pages or so, and I wanted to present it from the stance of, what if Crockett only had the barest idea of what this book was about, what its characters were like yet? What does he do from a fresh take? So I'll walk you through my L1s and my L2s for the early part of the book. I think I'm only focusing on like the first 50 pages here. And as I typically do, I wind up getting more grounded into character development. So I'll be focusing on Sam, Sadie, and Dove. So one of the first things that I always encourage students to do is look at the very first text evidence that's given to you. We get a title. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So if I'm a good reader, I'm looking at that title and I'm trying to think, okay, what are my assumptions already? Why pick a title like that? I'm going to tell you, names matter. If they didn't, you wouldn't get offended when somebody calls you by the wrong name or gives you a nickname that you don't like. Names matter. They represent something. They communicate larger ideas about all of us. So why tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow? Well, as a kid who has sat through senior English and read Macbeth, as an English major who studied Macbeth and summer Shakespeare with Dr. Shirley Laird, as a teacher of 18 years who has gone over and over and over Macbeth 3 times a day, 2 semesters a year, 18 years in a row, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow is a line I'm very familiar with. It comes from one of Macbeth's last monologues in the play, where he says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. So he's sitting at the very end of his play, feeling all of the weight of tragedy and loss and everything upon him. And he is utterly weighed down by the sense of endless nothingness to come, that it's just on repeat, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. He's feeling this endless longevity of days to come that for him mean nothing. Now, if I were a reader who had never wrangled with Macbeth before, what would I think about a title like Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? Well, I noticed that there's the repetition of and. So I get a cumulative effect. It's not just tomorrow. If it were just the title tomorrow, I'm thinking, okay, one word tomorrow, we're looking ahead. That seems hopeful. It seems like there's somewhere to go. There's possibility. There's potential, the future, that we're looking ahead. That seems uplifting. That seems inspiring. But with a cumulative effect, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. My gut tells me it could go one of two ways. One, it could add emphasis to that potential, that fulfillment of possibility. It's not just tomorrow, it's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Summer break seems like an endless horizon of possibility and freedom. That it meant getting to go to my grandpa's house, that it meant getting to spend my summer back home in Tennessee, that it meant all of these endless summer days to come. It was tomorrow and the tomorrow after that and the tomorrow after that. Or it could go the other way and instead, like, lean toward what Macbeth was thinking, that it's tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. So maybe there's not such a hopefulness to it. Maybe there's some sort of dread, some sort of grudging despair that's creeping ahead. Maybe it's not just tomorrow, but also tomorrow. Then I started reading the book. And on page 4, I hit my first annotation. Sam is trying to weave his way through a crowd at the train station. He has seen Sadie in the crowd, so he's trying to get through and say a billion excuse me's while not meaning really excuse me. He's just mindlessly saying this. And it says, unless they were unreliable or clearly established as lunatics or scoundrels, characters in novels, movies, and games were meant to be taken at face value, the totality of what they did or what they said. But people, the ordinary, the decent, and basically honest, couldn't get through the day without that one indispensable bit of programming that allowed you to say one thing and mean, feel, even do another. So it made me think, man, this is so true. People are just incredibly complex. How often do you think you know somebody only for them to turn around and surprise you? And I love that about my sophomores. Man, I get to have an entire calendar year with sophomores, and they grow so much in that 1 year. They start out as being these freshmen, still on the tail end of freshman year and trying to learn their way through high school. And then they wind up being so acclimated to high school, they're beyond ready to be juniors. But I also love this about my other characters in books. I love this about real people who often surprise you by being something that you didn't even imagine them to be. Sometimes they're a mirror for yourself, they're a mirror of me, or that they're a mirror of somebody else that I know. Later on page 4, just down below that, Sam could imagine reporting the congestion in the train station and his roommate Mark saying, "Weren't you even curious what it was in that sign? There's a world of people and things, and if you can manage to stop being a misanthrope for a second." What a word, misanthrope. What a great word for such a miserable person. You know, I always tell students we got to elevate our language, especially in Honors 10, especially in AP. And the best way of doing that is not by just doing vocab exercises. That helps. But really, the best way is the authentic way of reading more and then employing those words in your own writing. Take them out for a test spin. You read through a book and you find misanthrope and you don't know what that means? Cool. Highlight it, look it up, and then think, ooh, it means somebody who's just generally miserable with everything in the world. When can I use that to describe somebody? And then try it out sometime. When I was a junior in high school, I was really big into Dungeons and Dragons. And in the early models of D&D, you had your weapons that were classed as ranged weapons or melee weapons, the hand-to-hand stuff like swords and axes. And I used it so much that it was just second nature to my own language. And in writing an essay, I used the word melee, and my teacher circled it, and she had to come talk to me about it and say, "Jason, what a word, melee. Ooh, my blah, blah." And here I am sitting there thinking, I got it from D&D. But for her, she was really impressed in 1996 that a kid would know a word like that. Later on page 7, when Sam finally gets together with Sadie and they start talking, they're talking about this poster that everybody at the train station has been crowded around. It's one of these 3D effect posters. I can remember them back in 95, 96. And everybody, it was such a trend back then. Everybody wanted to have them and you wanted to show them off. And, oh, I can see it. I can see it. Can you see it? Because not everybody could see it. I struggled to see it. And they always told you, try to let your eyes cross, or try to let your eyes relax, or try to see through the picture into whatever. And sometimes you get like a 3D blurred cross-eyed effect of something. And I think maybe, one time I might have seen a rocket ship shape or something like that, but I always struggled to actually see what was there. Well, Sadie is talking to Sam, and Sam thinks, the things people find amusing. And she says, "What, you disapprove?" He says, "This can be found in any dorm, common room, or campus, every train station in Boston." And she's like, "Sam, don't you want to see the world with magic eyes?" And Sam, probably sarcastically, says, "I'm always seeing the world with magic eyes. I'm exploding with childish wonder." I get on the surface level that that's Sam being sarcastic. I can totally, in the first 7 pages, already get, okay, that's him being sarcastic. But also, he is reaching out for a connection with this Sadie that he almost missed out on, that he feels like I've been trying to reconnect with her, this person from my past. He's probably got some sort of relationship, romantic attachment to her. And here he's talking to the girl he was trying to connect with. And for him to say, I'm always seeing the world with magic eyes. It feels like it has to mean more than that too. So maybe it's because of a past that they have. Maybe it's because of a video game history that they have together, that his experience with her has changed him somehow and he's always seeing the world with a sort of magic eyes. Or maybe it's, you know what, an allusion to how we all see the world differently. Later on page 8, he's thinking about her eye coloring, where she's got the same brown eyes that have golden flecks in them, and that his mother had told him that that kind of coloration is called heterochromia. And Sam looked at Sadie, and he sees her not just as the woman she is in front of him, but that she had had those same eyes as a kid. So he's seeing her as child Sadie, as young 20-something woman Sadie, and maybe even like future older person Sadie. And Sam thought, this is what time travel is. It's looking at a person and seeing them in the present and in the past concurrently. And that mode of transport only worked with those one had known a significant time. I would also say that kind of mode only works when you have an empathy for other human beings. Sam's able to look at Sadie and in one instant see not only the person he wants to reconnect with now, but also the childhood friend that she was back then. The woman she is now that he probably doesn't know because he's not talked to her in a long while. So maybe she's got a lot of other complications and baggage with him. And maybe he's also looking at the older woman she would one day become. If you can ever learn to do that, you're looking at somebody in front of you. One of these days, kids, you'll look at your parents and you're going to be struck by something that they do or something that they say. You're going to see a moment of vulnerability. You're going to see a moment of frustration or of anger or of sadness or something. If you have an empathy, you might think, you know, maybe my dad was a scared kid once upon a time too. And maybe somewhere inside of him, he's still scared about blank. Or maybe you're looking at a kid in your class and you're thinking, I can not only see who you are now, but because of the life that you're living, the experiences you've had, I can see exactly what you're going to look like when you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s. That's having an empathy for other people. And when you can do that, you can't help but engender some empathy for the human experience. They're not just a name. They're not just a stereotype. They're an actual human being that you have sympathy for. And man, oh man, I feel like that's a trick we need to remember to do more often. By page 9, Sam gave her another quick hug, or she gave him another quick hug and said, you know, it's good running into you. She started walking toward the train, and Sam tried to figure out a way to make her stop. If this were a video game, he could hit pause. He could restart, say different things, the right ones this time. He could search in his inventory for the item that would make Sadie not leave. So Sam thinks and perceives through the lens of video games. Maybe he doesn't do this all the time because human beings are complex, but as a person who grew up loving video games, sometimes you think through that metaphorical aspect that, man, I wish I could hit a pause button and just keep her here in this moment with me, and maybe even hit a reset button and start things all over again. So it sounds like Sam and Sadie had something in their past. They had a childhood together, or they had a youth together, and maybe something went wrong in that past, and things since then have continued to go wrong, and Sam wishes that he could just hit the reset button on it. Back in the old days when I had to play Super Mario Brothers with, whatever extra lives you could rack up by hitting the Koopa shell over and over, that was generous. Games like Mega Man, Kid Icarus, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghosts and Goblins, those were way more unforgiving. But back then, we didn't have the hack like we have now. When you play your Nintendo Online version of the game, you can hold the trigger and rewind the game. That rewind trick allowed me to finally beat Legend of Zelda 2 a few years ago. But man, I had to gas the heck out of that trigger. How many times did I rewind from a bad fall or a hit that would have one-shotted me? But in real life, we don't have the luxury of a pause button, and restarts, if we ever even get them, are very complicated things. That means, from my perspective, that our experiences, our choices, the interactions that we have become that much more important. You don't get to just hit pause. You don't get to just rewind. Whatever happens is going to have repercussions, lasting impacts. The things you say to somebody, man, they're going to take them with you wherever they go. There's a saying that, the axe forgets, but the tree remembers. Maybe to the axe, you just casually slipped and nicked the tree. The axe didn't even think about it, but the tree will have that scar for the rest of its life. Also, right beneath it, they say they hadn't even exchanged phone numbers. He thought desperately. His mind cycled through the ways a person could find a person in 1995. Whoa! So this book is happening the year I finished being a sophomore and started being a junior. Yeah, this would have to be my junior year because that's supposed to be Christmas of 1995, which is still, whoa, that's a way back for me. But it also puts me into a frame of reference here. I, back then, was not so much younger than these characters would have been, who are already in their first or second year of college. So I'm only like 3-4 years younger than they are. I was a junior in high school, and man, I know I made plenty of mistakes despite thinking that I was so capable. But here, they're not so different from who I was then, too. Also, it's 95, and he's right. They didn't have a chance to exchange phone numbers, so how are you going to find this person? There was no Google. The first Google search didn't happen until 98. There was no vast internet. There was no social media. Finding a person would have been largely more difficult than just, well, I've got their snap. Right afterward, on page 10, Sam is still thinking about it, and he says he knew himself, and he knew he was the type of person that never called anyone unless he was absolutely certain the advance would be welcomed. His brain was treacherously negative. That's what I highlighted. His brain was treacherously negative. He would invent that she had been cold toward him, that she hadn't even had a class that day, that she had simply wanted to get away from Sam. His brain would insist that if she wanted to see him, she would have given him a way to contact her. And he would conclude that, to Sadie, Sam represented a painful period of her life, and so, of course, she never wanted to see him again. For any of my students or family members who know me, they know that Jason Crockett can have his dark moods. He can have his anger. He can be, in his feels about stuff. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh, Jason, he gets angry about things too. But I am also cognizant of that, and I try to avoid it. The Stoics teach us that we suffer so much more in our imaginative mind than we do in reality. When you had a bad interaction with somebody, you often read so much more into that experience than they had meant for you to read into it. How many times have you had, you've been rebuffed by somebody at work, or you had somebody make a comment to you, or even just in your text messages, you sent out an idea and they replied with, okay, period. All lowercase, just a period. They didn't necessarily mean anything by that. They just wrote okay. But it's possible they meant something sarcastic, or maybe you just dwelled upon it and thought, what did they mean? What did they mean? Oh no, of course they meant this, blah, blah, blah. How many times have you been in the shower or you've been driving and you've been inventing, how would I have handled that argument? How would I have handled that scenario? Of course, they meant it like this. And then you dwell upon it and you obsess about it, and it becomes this whole thing that never even had to struggle. We suffer so much more in our imagination than we do in reality. Sam doesn't know all the complicated baggage that this woman, Sadie, has been through since their childhood. He's not seen her in years, apparently, and I have to imagine, that she's gone and lived her life. She's had other relationships. She's had other experiences that maybe have made her hurt or whatever. She might be looking at this experience with Sam through an entirely different lens than he is. But he auto-assumes, because Sam apparently is that misanthrope, that she must mean something negative by it. But, someone says, hey, I need to talk to you. And automatically you might be set up for the, uh-oh, what now? Like I said, I know just as well as anyone how you hardwire your brain when you always expect the negative, when you always tell yourself the downers. But what if we trained ourselves not for the impending disaster, but the unavoidable successes? What if we didn't always say, well, they're always like that, it's always going to be. What if it was, you are definitely going to win? There's no avoiding getting a good grade tomorrow. It's going to happen that you succeed. By page 11, we're coming to the end of that section, and the train doors had closed, returning Sadie to her square, and Sam looked down at that little floppy disk. Kids, we used to have things that were called floppy disks. They were these huge, big, flimsy square things, but then they got down to 3.5 inches. And they were still incredibly flimsy and floppy. They could break and you could lose everything on them so easily. But here she has a copy of her game on that disc. And Sam looked down at it. The title scrawled on it was Solution. And I was thinking, okay, here we are, back to titles, back to names. Sadie has named her game Solution. And I know that names matter, so play that L1, L2 assumption game again with the evidence. Why solution? What comes to mind? So video games are supposed to be about solving problems or solving puzzles. So maybe it's some sort of maze or labyrinth. Maybe it's some sort of game like Block Blast or Candy Crush where you're trying to find the solution. It's like a Tetris kind of thing to unlock levels. Maybe it's something like that. Solution, I'm thinking of, the correct answer to something, like in math. You're thinking of the correct answer to a dangerous situation, that this is a difficult scenario we're in. I have the solution. And now because I am who I am, I'm also thinking, in this moment, Sam is struggling to reconnect with Sadie. He really wants to reconnect with her. He sought her through the crowded crowd. And even though she was turned away, he brought her back. She might have just walked out of his life entirely, no phone number, no contact. But what if this video game is her reaching back saying, here's my calling card. Here's the solution to your desire to reconnect with me, that it's going to be through video games. On the bottom of page 11, Sam is thinking about the video game solution. He's thinking about, his semester at school. He's thinking about his math class, and his advisor in the math department had told Sam, I get that you're good at this, but you may not necessarily be as good at it or as into it as your talents are. The advisor's parting words were, you're incredibly gifted, Sam, but it's worth noting that to be good at something is not quite the same as loving it. And his advisor is giving him a heads up of, hey, this line of work may not be for you. Just because you're good at a thing doesn't mean you love it. Just because you're good at a sport, just because you're good at whatever, doesn't mean you always love it. I grew up wanting to tell stories and draw comics. I wanted to draw all the time, and I wanted to tell stories. That's why I got into D&D. That's why I got into making my own comics. That's why I read so much as a kid and drew so much. I wanted to tell my own stories. But you ask any successful writer, and they love it. They love the work that they do. I get it. But every day showing up, there's a blank screen in front of you, and you've got to fill it with, 1,600, 2,000 words. You've got to get so many pages done. You still have to force your way through it. Writing, even though I loved it, is still work. You don't always get the right words down the first time. Matter of fact, most of the time, you never get the right words down the first time. It's a process. It's organic. It grows and revises as we do. But it means you have to go back to it. I always loved drawing, but something that I learned about the process, the craft of it, is that artists would sketch an idea of what they were going to do, and then they might do another couple of thumbnail sketches. They might do multiple sketches before they even sat down to start redrawing it. And here, I just wanted to sit down at the fresh page and just draw what came to mind and fix it as I go. And if I had to sit back at it and say, okay, now redraw that and make it even better, that was such a turnoff for me, because it was like, I already drew it. I have to do it again. I have to make it even better. Yeah, because it's a craft. It's a product that you're creating. These comic artists don't just come up with the right scenes for their panels on the first try. There's so many different variants of what they practice to get in there. So you might really love the art, but you might also not love the work of it. You might be really good at doing something, but not really like the repetitive process at getting better at it. Towards the end of that chapter on 12, they had just finished playing the game, Sam and his roommate Marks. And, I thought we'd play for 5 minutes, but they got so sucked into playing whatever this game solution is. One of the last lines of that chapter is that Marks put on his coat, camel colored like Sadie's. And I had to stop and think, why? Why? I highlighted this all the way back in June, and now it's July, and I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, okay, why is that coat the same as Sadie's? Gabrielle Zevin is writing a book. Every sentence that she puts in here needs to be intentional because she has editors who go back through and clean up her work and say, add a scene about this, cut about 1,000 words of this. They're going to go through and revise. Why a detail like that? I don't know much of anything about Marks as a roommate. I don't know much of anything about Sam or Sadie yet, but something about Marks's coat reminds Sam of Sadie once again. So maybe it's supposed to be a standout detail here because maybe Marks is similar in ways to Sadie. I don't know anything yet. Or maybe it's just, we're bringing Sam's mind once again back to Sadie. That it's not just the bizarre nature of the game. It's not just this incident. Oh yeah, we met. I played the game. Let's focus more on the game now. Because it's not about the game. It's always about her. It's bringing it back to her, is what it seems like to me. Later, you get into Sadie's chapter where she's thinking about her childhood, her sister being in the hospital so much. Alice was having to go through all of these treatments. On page 15, Sadie might not have many friends, but she never felt that she needed them. It says Alice was nay plus ultra. Nay plus ultra? I had to highlight that because I'd never heard that before. And I was thinking, okay, well, what does that mean? This is just like stumbling upon a word misanthrope. I know the word misanthrope, but that's great vocab. Nay plus ultra? I don't know what that is. So you look it up and it means no one better, the ultimate. And right after it, of course, Zevin explains it. Alice was nay plus ultra. No one was cleverer, more daring, more beautiful, more athletic, more hilarious, more fill in the adjective of your choice than Alice. So in her perspective as a child, Alice was the ultimate. Alice was somebody who was better than her in plenty of ways, but also was what Sadie needed in her life. Except she and Alice don't always get along. Alice is going through her treatments. Alice gets really irritated at something she said, and they boot Sadie from the room. And who does she find but her first connection with Sam in the little foyer area playing on an old Nintendo? So something about that experience sets us up. Alice was nay plus ultra. Nobody was better or more insightful or more clever or a better friend. Except, apparently, there might be, because Sadie right after that stumbles into her first connection with Sam. While they're playing video games here together, Sadie remarks that Sam is so fantastically good. And on page 18, she asks, do you have a Nintendo at home? And he says, no, but my grandfather has a Donkey Kong machine in his restaurant. He lets me play as much as I want for free. And what I highlighted was, and the thing about games is, if you get good at one game, you can be good at any game. That's what I think. They're all hand-eye coordination and observing patterns. Okay, I had two things about this. A, is that really true? If you get good at one game, you're going to be good at all games? Really? Because games can be easy to learn and yet really hard to master. Games could be really tricky to learn and master. To say that it's all hand-eye coordination seems reductive. And, my hands and my thumbs and my eyes, they have learned deeply what buttons to push and when to jump. I'm thinking right now about, a level in Super Mario Brothers 2 where you're in the ice world and there's these levels and the little snowball monsters are skating at you. And I can run that level right now and jump, 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 duck, jump. And like my muscles, my thumbs, it is ingrained because I've played that level so many times. I've learned the movements of it. 30 years later, I could still jump and immediately duck where I need to. But having those movements helps me play that level. And yet I don't know that it makes me, great to succeed at every other game. B, observing the patterns in your life, observing the patterns in other people, observing the patterns in what we read and how it connects to other things. I will say, okay, that is one of my big goals. With every class, with an honors class, all my kids, I want you all to see beyond the page. He says, if you get good at one game, you can be good at any game because they're all hand-eye coordination and observing patterns. Observing patterns matters. When you read Beowulf in the classroom, it's not just about reading Beowulf, it's what do his judgments here say about our judgments in the real world? Does his value about this still hold up in a society like ours? Do his actions here still hold up in a world like ours? What does Beowulf's experience say about the experience of the modern veteran? Or what is Beowulf's depiction as an Anglo-Saxon or Danish epic hero? What do his values say about our epic heroes like Superman or Captain America or Iron Man, Batman? What do they say about that? It is all about looking at the patterns beyond the text. Also, there probably is something to it that training yourself to be, play video games like this does make you better at playing video games in other formats. But I don't think it makes you good or great at every video game you otherwise go on to play. Later on, Sadie, has left the room and the nurses are surprised. They're like, oh, wait, Sam actually talked to you? Sam opened up to you? Well, this is entirely up to you, but it would be great if you come back tomorrow and try talking to him again, because nobody's been able to get Sam to connect. He's got this injury. He has to have about 1 billion surgeries. He is so isolated and removed. There's a loneliness that is setting into this kid who is losing his sense of belonging. And for one reason or another, he opened up to a character like Sadie. They connected over a video game. And we'd really like it if you came back and talked to him again. On page 21, there's a paragraph that starts, "To allow yourself to play with another person is no small risk. It means allowing yourself to be open, to be exposed, to be hurt. It is the human equivalent of the dog rolling on its back. I know you won't hurt me, even though you can. It is the dog putting its mouth around your hand and never biting down. To play requires trust and love." And I thought, yes, I highlighted it, and it immediately reminded me of communion. When we're teaching literature, when you're looking at symbolic actions in literature, books, movies, whatever, communion is like the Lord's Supper. We all come together in this act. In my faith, in my Christianity, we all come together and we have this one act that puts us together. And it is an act of consuming. We lift up the little cup of grape juice and we say, this is the blood. And then we drink it in an act of remembrance of Christ. And then you eat the little wafer and you do the same thing. Do this in remembrance of me, he says. Well, playing a video game with somebody else, it's the same kind of communion. It's not the Lord's Supper, but it is an act of consuming with other people. You think, I tell my students, you think when you go to lunch, who do you sit with at lunch and who do you not sit with at lunch? It's kind of like the watering hole on the savannah in Africa. When the zebras go up to the water hole, you really don't want to water with the other predators right there beside you. Sometimes they do. Sometimes all of God's creatures come together for the same living water at the same place and they don't kill each other. But you got to be careful. Sometimes you go to drink from that river and you can't see in. There might be an alligator or a crocodile waiting to bite your hand or your head off. You got to be careful about who you come together with when you consume. It is a very vulnerable situation. You are open and, you're eager to have familiar folks that are around you. We consume, we take in with like-minded people. And it's awkward to be sitting at a table with a bunch of people you don't know, or it's awkward to be sitting at a table with a bunch of people that you feel, I am not like these folks. To play a game with them lowers the barriers and invites the same kind of vulnerability. While he was in the hospital, Sam would draw these mazes for her. And on page 22, his mazes were always for Sadie. He would slip one into her pocket before she left. I made this for you, he'd say. It's nothing much. Bring it back next time so I can see the solution. And I thought, bing, 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 bing. There's that word again, solution. So I highlighted it and I thought, aha, there it is. That's the name of Sadie's future game. Did she get the name from her childhood experience with Sam? Did she name her game as like an homage to Sam or their childhood friendship? He was like her mentor. He got her into these video games. Or is the name like a symbolic code word? You know, she gives him this floppy disk just like he gave her the maze. Solve this, come up with the solution to unlock my friendship again. Like, is that what it's supposed to mean? And of course, Sadie was not entirely upfront with Sam in their childhood. She is hanging out with him because it gets her some community service hours, but really she's hanging out with him because she likes him. The community service thing is just a check mark. Okay, great. It counts for that. But Sadie's mistake is that she's not upfront honest with Sam about that. And just like happens in the best of in Shakespeare or in our movies, you know, a character goes on with this act thinking, I'll handle it before there's a problem. And invariably we get to that problem pretty pronto. And here Sadie's solution for Sam was messy and unkind because she didn't tell him, and he thinks, aha, you're just using me. By chapter 23 on page 25, we get to our third character, Dove. And it says, the seminar was led by 28-year-old Dove Mizra, surname in the course catalog, but known only by his given name in gaming circles. Everybody just calls him Dove. I thought, okay, here we go, Dove. I knew this was going to be a section that would likely bother some readers. I didn't anticipate just how bothered some new students or some parents would be by this guy. But Dove makes us angry, and his behavior does gross us out. But the complicated thing about a person like Dove, a character like Dove, is that he does demonstrate himself to be capable in some other ways. He's not written off as just a stereotype of this gross teacher, this I'm going to flex all about myself, I'm going to be all self-important in all of this. I don't think Zevin is ever glorifying him or his conduct. And I mean, I have known teachers, professors, high school teachers who will cuss in front of their students. More so, I think, up north or out west than I do here in Tennessee. But I have known teachers who do that. And I think sometimes they do it to buy some sort of credibility or coolness with their kids. Like, see, I'm inviting you in on it too. But I'm not cool with it. In my very first job teaching at a medical technical school, I had adults in my classes, like people who were my age or my parents' age or older. And I can remember there being a guy in the class saying that he was personally offended by teachers who would try to just cuss in front of the other guys in class. Because he said, you know, just because we're all guys doesn't mean we all cuss. We're not like that. So I have known teachers who do with it, but I'm not cool with it. And Dove definitely crosses the appropriate boundary lines. I think Zevin's probably holding him up. Like, see, you remember guys like this? You remember people like this? We've got teachers that are like this. We've got people in our work environment that are like this. People in your relationships or your families or your churches that are like this. He thinks he's so cool, but really he's a dirtbag. And teachers, because speaking as one, teachers are supposed to be mentors that we trust because we teach others to be better. We train them up in the way that they should go. The problem is Dove, as despicable as a person as he may be, does in a way make them better video game creators. He does inspire his students to be better video game designers, but he's also a predator of them. And I think that's the unforgivable sticking point that I just can't get past with him. He cultivates these students to add to his own work. And I've known teachers that are like that too, who want to add you, the wonder student, to their collection. They'll befriend you. They may cross some appropriate lines to breed a sort of familiarity, but really they're trying to add you to their collection. And that kind of happens in Harry Potter too, when Professor Slughorn comes around by book 6 or 7. Slughorn's not an evil professor, but he likes cultivating and collecting students to add to his collection of champions. I am connected to so-and-so. I had so-and-so in my class. Also, I think Dove is just full of it. Like how he brags that he switches from one code to another because he gets bored, or, that's him trying to flex on just how fluent he is in all these different coding languages, more so than any of us, because he's trying to impress us that he can just switch from this to that. But you know what? I'm not a coder, so I don't know. You'll have to tell me. I don't think that that's smart or strategic to use different codes within the same program. He says, oh, that's what compilers are for. You know what? My wife teaches coding at the university level, and I don't think any of the experts would agree with his assertion on the seamlessness of just using a compiler to fix all of that. Also, here we have some character inferences about Sadie, who finds Dove not only vulgar and repellent, but also attractive. A, gross Sadie, ew. But B, what judgments am I making about her that she finds herself, not unlike others, craving Dove's attentions even beyond the classroom? I think there's a universal trait here that we all come to like things that are not in our best interests, and yet we know it and we pursue them anyway. Later on page 27, Sadie says that Sadie didn't know why she bothered. I was surprised by this, but again, I shouldn't have been. People are complex. I was expecting here are two women in a male-dominated field, Sadie and Hannah, classroom full of guys and coding. Of course, they'll draw together for strength. It's a sisterhood that they can rely on each other. But man, that was a mistake of mine too, because that writes off a person as a stereotype, as if all women get along, as if all men get along. And it also avoids the complexity of their environment. Individuals in this environment are going to cling to the power group and turn against the weak outlier, even if they're of their own gender, even if they're in the minority who needs to stick together. On page 28, Dove says he hated everything. He hated this, he hated that, he hated this about all these different video game things. And I thought, great, we've got another kind of misanthrope here. I don't know how a guy like Dove does it. I don't know how he gets people to like him, how he charms them, when he just so loudly professes to hate everything they do, to hate everything they like. He hates this because it's cool. He hates that because it's a try-hard. And he's such a poser. He hates all the fun games that everyone else likes, and then he flips and brags, I was in the military, y'all are just glorifying guns. But he's a hypocrite because his famous game, Dead Sea, does all the things that he claims to hate. It's a shooter too. Dove, I think, just needs attention. On page 29, Hannah was the first to offer feedback. And what is it? It's immediately ridicule. Because demeaning Sadie is Hannah's path to increasing her own position in the class. She throws Sadie to the wolves. She throws her to the lions because that lets her stand among them and act like one of them and not become a victim to them. She so easily slips into that immature mockery of, I thought your sound effect sounded like a fart. Because that kind of immature mockery further mocks Sadie in front of the whole crowd. And then by page 30 and 31, they're describing the game and reiterating its name, solution. That you're having to solve all these problems in as quick a time as possible. And then if you can do this and get more points, you can possibly unlock secrets about the game and find out more and more of what you're really doing on this processing line. Solution. And I thought, oh no, oh man, I have figured out what Sadie's game really is. And as dark as it is, I think it's brilliant in a way, because Sadie's game reveals that if you have been super efficient and you didn't spend all these points or whatever, you have been a top tier collaborator with the Nazi Third Reich. You have been building weapons for the Nazis, and you have been hyper efficient and not, disturbing their work. But even if you do spend the points and you try to drag your feet and you accomplish the tasks in as long a time as possible, it still makes you have the low score of conscientious objector. Like, you can't really win the game and win the game. Even if you win at the lowest score possible, you're still a loser for it. And I think, oh man, how brilliant and dark is that she takes a video game and she makes it more about social commentary and the human creature than just a point and click, let's get the blocks all blasted. And I totally see where she took inspiration from her grandmother and her own heritage, as well as, turning the tables on her own classmates, who in a way are just as complacent in capitulating to whatever Dove says. Some players in that class, like Hannah, are excited to commit and then disgusted when they see what Sadie has revealed them to be. But another problem here is Sadie is capitulating too. She's playing the game too. Sadie even says the game's about being complicit, and if you play, you lose. She eagerly wants Dove to like her work and her, and she's no better than the rest of them. So now I'm starting to make judgments about Sam. I'm starting to make some judgments about Sadie, where she's going. I'm starting to make some judgments about Dove. We come back to words like on page 35, lonely. Lonely is a word that has stood out to me this summer because in some of the other books I've had to read for class and friends, the lonely characters are at risk of falling to the dark side. They've been isolated, they've been besieged by their loneliness, and often this is a situation they've created for themselves or allowed to be created. And here too, Sadie's at risk of falling to the dark side because of a loneliness. Dove tells her on page 44 that you have to be careful when you play strategy games like Metal Gear Solid or any of these, because you're not just a video game player, you're a creator too. And I think that's really apt, but Dove is such a tempting, dark figure to her. I can't help but be reminded that he sounds like a Satan kind of devil figure archetype. He's tempting his victim in this intimate situation where he invites her back for one last date, one more night before he goes back to Israel to be with his wife and child. And he's tempting her in this video game saying, here's one more lesson to learn. You are a creator. You, like Satan telling somebody, you're just as powerful, just as wise as God. You are a video game creator. And that's a dark temptation. If Sadie takes this deal, she's in danger of losing more than just, your soul in a deal with the devil. You're in danger of losing more, something sacred about yourself, than just giving in to whatever fleshly temptations with Dove. Sadie says, what greater enemy do you have than oneself? And that's on page 45. Often in video games, the hero must confront a shadow version of themselves. Link has to face off against Dark Link. Mario gets Wario at one point, like this bizarro version of Mario. It reminds me of the never-ending story where the hero, Atreyu, must pass through the second challenge by facing a mirror. And it was supposed to be so terrifying a challenge that they say men ran screaming mad from it. But here, Sadie is aware that she, just like all of us, we're often our own worst enemy. She's submitting herself to a person that shouldn't have any power over her. So I, get the question, why are we reading this? Well, again, I have to think that even scenes with Sadie and Dove, this is super relevant. As a parent, as a teacher, I have children who are going to find themselves in demeaning circumstances where they're going to be rivaled against a dark, influential person. Somebody has power or agency over them. And I need these kids, I need my kids to consider, how are you going to handle that? Are you going to blindly walk into situations like this? Are you going to blindly submit yourself to somebody like that? I can totally see where some parents would come to a scene like this with discomfort, especially if they, mistakenly think that this book is just being thrown to kids without thought. But video games and reading these novels give us a chance to consider how we would handle a situation like that, to explore people that we know who exploit others like that. Playtime, reading the lives of others, it gives us a chance to inhabit these circumstances for ourselves first. So that's about the first 50 pages of the book, and that's where I'm going to pause with this episode. I want you to remember, nobody expects you to read perfectly. Not in an honors class, not in a regular English class, not when you're just reading books with friends or for yourself. Nobody expects you to read perfectly. You need to read honestly. You need to be present, be curious, ask questions, enjoy it, leave a sticky note, even write question marks in the margin. But let the book meet you where you are. If you liked Gabrielle Zevin's book and you've read it, man, that's great. And if you didn't like the book, that's fair too. It's always okay to not like the work as long as you did give it a fair shot and actually read the whole thing. But one thing I would caution any student of mine, watch out for the negativity. Man, it's a black hole and you will struggle against it and not even realize how that negative attitude drags you down. Often students come into a class and say, "Oh, I hated that book, it was stupid." Or, "Man, I'm so done, I'm about to crash out." And it's like, we literally just started. But if you start talking like that, if you keep talking like that, and then your actions become your habits, and your habits become your character, and what we think, we become. So think positively, be open-minded, read new things. I'm starting back to school here at the end of the month, earlier and earlier every summer it seems. And if you're someone who listens to the show and you did read Zevin's book, give me a shout out and let me know what you think. Or if you also watched Superman this summer and you either loved it or hated it, let me know. I loved it. And if you're a student in my class, I'll see you on the first day of August. Until then, enjoy the rest of the book. Don't rush. If you get stuck, reach out and let me know. Remember, there's always another tomorrow.